Well, 20 years ago would never have been considered the high water mark for dream cars. 1984, there was nothing really exciting on the horizon. They had the 308, the 328 was about to be introduced, but there was a new car that was going to be brought out by Ferrari that was going to put the excitement back into dream cars. The original GTO had its new partner, the 288 GTO. It was going to be developed for FIA Group B racing. It was going to be the ultimate in street cars, the ultimate in race cars. 2.8 liters, twin turbos, 400 horsepower. This was going to be the weapon of choice for most guys racing in Group B. So let's take this thing for a spin and see how it really performs. Well, the first thing you do when you get into this 288 GTO is realize that the car, although it looks like a 308 to the average guy, is definitely not a 308. The chassis is actually 4 inches longer than the original 308 328, and that was in order to put the motor, which was only 2.8 liters instead of 3 liters or 3.2 liters, longitudinally instead of transversely in the back end. That was one of the first times they actually did that. With the gearbox behind it, it had to be extended 4 inches in chassis, making the wheelbase also 4 inches longer. So none of the body panels actually fit. After that, it looks like a car on steroids. It's got these great big fender flares front and rear. What gave this little monster all that horsepower was the IHI turbos. It was a twin turbo with intercoolers that gave it tons and tons of torque and horsepower considering the size of the engine. That coupled with 4 valves per cylinder, a reworked head, made this thing a strong, strong performer. You know what's really amazing is how much torque these little motors make. The gearbox on this, typical Ferrari. You have to be precise, make sure you get it right in the gates. But once you get it down and take your time, it's a very nice gearbox. The handling on this car is exceptional, probably because of the unequal length A-arms, both front and rear. It's got coilovers on front and rear, independent suspension all the way around, and of course roll bars front and back, which make this car as fun to drive on the tight, windy bits as it is on the highway. Keep in mind, top speed on this car in 1984 was 190 miles an hour in 5th gear. Now any car that does 190 miles an hour better have great brakes on it. That's exactly what this car has. It's got 4 great big ventilated discs that help haul this car down from just about any speed. Keep in mind, this is the first time Ferrari felt that a car was worthy of the name GTO, and it was the first time Ferrari in 20 years had built a purpose-built race car, which is exactly what this car was. They had to build 200 cars to be eligible for Group B. They ended up building 272 of these monsters, and none of them were destined for the North American market. So each one of these cars that came in had to be retrofitted, federalized, and then probably put back to the way it was. Well, I've got to admit, I'm pleasantly surprised on the performance of this car. And this car is a great original car. It's got 15,000 miles on it. It's never been repainted. The interior is like brand new. The bolsters on the seats, not even worn. There's barely a stone chip in the front end of this car. The wheels, no nicks. The engine bay looks like it the day it left the factory. This car is basically a brand new car out of the box. Now keep in mind, list price on this car was about $85,000 brand new. In the early 90s, late 80s, these cars climbed to almost $1 million. They've come back. They're about $325,000. Performance of this car, worth every penny. Watch for this car to probably go back up in value too.
My dad's a big believer in, if I'm gonna be selling these cars, 1, obviously knowing enough about them, but 2, knowing what the driving experience is like. So when we got the 288 in, he tossed me the keys, he said, go, take 20 minutes and learn what the driving experience is like in this thing.
The 288 GTO was the first real supercar and Ferrari's first supercar of the 288, F40, F50 Enzo line. When Ferrari decided to go Group B rally racing, 288 GTO is what they were going to do it with. After the death of so many drivers, Group B was canceled and went to Group A, and these cars never became race cars. Ferrari decided they were going to base this car off the 308, but after it was all said and done, they had big flares on the car, a lot of Kevlar and carbon fiber, and over 500 pounds lighter than the 308 with a little bit more horsepower. As the 308, it's a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car. They took the 308 engine and they changed it to longitudinally. They debored the engine. The 288 GTO stands for 2.8 liter V8. They added the turbos and it balanced out around 400 horsepower. With more room in the rear, they were able to lengthen the wheelbase and widen the track width to make this thing more of a race car. At 400 horsepower and about 2,500 pounds, this car was the first car to do 300 kilometers an hour. That's about 186 miles an hour, making this thing the first real supercar. What a cool car. This thing is super well balanced, maybe a little bit loose in the rear. You get on the gas, you hold your foot at the same spot, and then the turbos kick in, and the thing just takes off. But what I'm most surprised about, and one of the true marks of a high-performance supercar, is how well the thing stops. And this thing stops, holy cow. You think you're going good and you're all done. Then you've got another 50% throttle length and the thing just goes. With such low production numbers compared to every other supercar and extremely conservative styling by today's supercar standards, this has to be one of my favorite supercars.